Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Rejuvenating speaking to you from south of Jerusalem. Today is the 15th day of the month of Cheshvan, 5783. It's November 8th, 2022. This coming Shabbat we read Parshat Vayera, the book of Genesis, beginning chapter 18, verse 1, and concluding chapter 22, verse 24. It is the fourth parasha, the fourth weekly reading of the book of Genesis, and it continues to tell us about the life and times of Avraham Avinu, Abraham, our father, our patriarch. Today, Tuesday, is our elections in the United States, fraught with all sorts of tension, although I think that for the most part the results are pretty predictable. We'll all find out what it means, I guess, in the upcoming days and weeks. Israel, of course, we had our elections a week ago and voted into office, although I'm going to rephrase that in a moment. Voted into office was what is being termed as the most right-wing government ever in Israel. And, of course, a lot of people, a lot of foreign dignitaries and pundits and even people here in Israel are terrified that a right-wing government, a very religious government, as the very often used expression today, abused expression, the end of democracy. It seems that when the people you supported aren't voted into office, then it's the end of democracy. I'm sure many people will be hearing that in America as well over the next hours and days. The end of democracy. Well, it's not the end of democracy. In fact, it was a real shot in the arm for democracy in Israel, because after 4 previous elections in which no side of the political divide could really form a viable coalition, finally there is the chance for a viable and steady coalition. And right now the question is really whether Netanyahu, who will be the prime minister, will actually honor all the promises that he and his party, the Likud, and their fellow coalition makers promised and fought for throughout the campaign and before. Netanyahu is known in Israel as he's known abroad and considered to be real right-wing, and he's right of center, but he is extremely cautious and tries to sort of toe a middle line, and it's for some reason, I don't know why, seems to be very frightened, nervous about making certain changes in the legal situation here in Israel, which his opponents say all he does are things that are to his advantage. He's not interested in a nation, only in his personal problems. But his personal problems, to such a great extent, come from a legal and jurisprudential situation. I just made up that word. That is really screwed up here, and he would benefit personally, and the entire nation would benefit if this were dealt with properly and certain laws were enacted in order to change the situation. For some reason, he seems to be very nervous about doing that. I don't know why. I don't know what he's got to lose at this point, but hopefully he won't wobble, and we will get the most right-wing government in Israel, which, believe me, is not... there haven't been too many right-wing governments that are so far right that saying the most right-wing government is an expression of an extreme government, but that's what people try to pass on you. I said before, voted into office, but here in Israel, once the votes come in and they are, and you determine who's been voted in, how many seats, and who didn't make it, then a coalition has to be formed, because no one party has more than the minimum 61 seats out of 120-member Knesset, aka Parliament, in order to form a government on its own. But before anyone gets the mandate to try to form a government, the president of Israel, who is voted not by the population but by the members of Knesset themselves, and it's for the most part I forget words just as I'm about to say them. It's not a good habit. It's a show. It's like the Queen of England doesn't have too much power, but she does have the mandate to authorize the formation of a government, and that's what the president has here. He has to decide who he's going to choose to give the first chance to form a government, and of course it's going to be Netanyahu, but until he actually does that, and until the negotiations are made, we don't have a government, so it'll probably take a few weeks before we do have a government. But anyway, that's the current situation in Israel politically. In terms of the weather, we had a rainstorm today, always welcome, and we are in officially the rainy season, as you all know, and rain is always welcome here in Israel, even if it floods streets because of poor city planning. We still welcome the rain. Let's move on to Parshat Vayera, which means "and he appeared." Vayera, which is fascinating parsha, fascinating Torah reading. It's got so much in it, and it pretty much tells us more or less the remainder of Avraham's life following last week's parsha Lech Lecha, in which we were introduced to Avram in the first place. And let's read the first few lines in Hebrew, then in English. Then we'll discuss the opening verses and the parsha at length. Here we go. We're in chapter 18, verse 1. Vayera elav HaShem be'elonei mamre, v'hu yoshev petach ha'ohel kachom hayom. Vayisa enav vayar v'hine shlosha anashim nitzavim alav, vayarotz likratam mipetach ha'ohel vayishtachu arza. Vayomer Adonai im na matzati hen be'enecha, al na ta'avor me'al avadecha. Yukach na ma'at mayim rahatsu raglechem, v'hishanu tachat ha'etz, v'ekcha fat lechem, v'sa'adu libchem achar ta'avoru, ki al ken avartem al avadechem, vayomru ken ta'aseh ka'asher dibarta. Vayomer Avraham ha'ohela el Sara vayomer mahari shlosh se'im kemach solet klushi va'asi ugot. Ve'el bakar ratz Avraham va'ikach ben bakar rach vatov va'yiten el hanar vayomeher la'asot oto. Okay, let's read those verses in English. Hashem appeared. Vayera is he. Hashem appeared. He appeared. Hashem appeared to him, to Avram, in the plains of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day. He lifted his eyes and saw, and behold, 3 men were standing over him. He perceived, so he ran toward them from the entrance of the tent and bowed toward the ground. And he said, "My Lord, if I find favor in your eyes, please pass not away from your servant. Let some water be brought and wash your feet, and recline beneath the tree. I will fetch a morsel of bread that you may sustain yourselves, then go on, inasmuch as you have passed your servant's way." They said, "Do so, just as you have said." So Sarah hastened to the tent to Sarah and said, "Hurry, 3 seahs of meal, fine flour, knead and make cakes." Then Avraham ran to the cattle, took a calf tender and good, and gave it to the youth who hurried to prepare it. He took cream and milk and the calf which he had prepared and placed these before them. He stood over them beneath the tree, and they ate. And then they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "Behold, in the tent." And he said, now we're back to singular, and he said, "I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent which was behind him. Now Avraham and Sarah were old, well on in years. The manner of women had ceased to be with Sarah. And Sarah laughed at her, saying, "After I have withered, shall I again have delicate skin? And my husband is old." Then Hashem said to Avram, why is it that Sarah laughed, saying, shall I in truth bear a child, though I have aged? Is anything beyond Hashem? At the appointed time I will return to you at this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was frightened. But he said, no, you laughed indeed. So the men got up from there and gazed down towards Sodom, while Avram walked with them to escort them. Okay, this is the first, those I just read in English, the first 16 verses of the Parsha, and it's packed with action, it's packed with information, it's packed with all sorts of mysteries and secrets that we can unravel and reveal if we read carefully, and especially in the Hebrew. The language just tells so much more than the literal story that we're reading. First of all, Hashem appeared to him in the plains of Mamre. Okay. It's not every day that Hashem appears to somebody, and it wasn't every day that Hashem appeared to Avram. I haven't counted, but in all the times throughout his life that we read about that Hashem appeared to him were not many, but each one, of course, was extremely significant. So he appears to Avraham, and while Avraham was sitting in the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. So picking up from where we left off last week, after the birth of Yitzchak, before the birth of Yitzchak, but he was already announced that he would be born, after the commandment to circumcise himself and his son Ishmael and all the males of his household, he did, and so he circumcised himself, and so now he is sitting in the heat of the day. So our sages of old wanted to understand why this information is put here. What is the Torah telling us? And what it's telling us, our sages explain, is that Avraham was recovering from his circumcision. It would take a few days, of course, very painful for an elderly man, naturally. And so why was it such a hot day? Why is the Torah mentioned the heat? And our sages say, because Hashem made the day very hot. Why? Because Avraham, as we know, liked to welcome travelers, strangers, into his tent in order to bring them in, give them a meal, and after the meal he would encourage them to bless Hashem for the food that they ate, and in that way introduce them to Hashem, introduce them to the one God. Sort of a very sweet and soft pedal approach toward bringing these people toward consciousness and knowledge of the one God. This was Abraham's self-perceived mission in life, and he actually, we're told, positioned his tent at a crossroads so he could take advantage of all the traffic, all the through traffic that would pass by. And his tent, we're also told, had 4 entrances and 4 openings, so that from any direction his doors were always open. So back to the heat of the day. So Hashem made the day very hot with the intention that nobody would be out traveling. Such a hot day, it's dangerous to travel. So there'd be no wayfarers. So Avraham wouldn't have to work to welcome people and to prepare food for people and to greet people. He'd be able to rest and recover. That was Hashem's chesed, his kindness that he did toward Avraham. And Hashem himself paid a bikor cholim. He paid a visit to the infirmed, to the ill, which is a mitzvah that if someone is ill, either at home or in a hospital, it is a mitzvah. It's a wonderful thing to pay them a visit. We all know how important it is to have people visit when you're not feeling your best, to know that they care. And we also know that on the physiological level, that it's curative. It helps people to recover, to have people come visit, spend time with them, cheer them up, etc. So Hashem himself came to visit. Now Avraham was sitting outside his tent in the heat of the day, because despite the fact that God made it especially hot so that nobody would go by, Avraham wanted to sit outside just in case somebody did go by. So here you see Avraham and HaShem working at cross purposes, really. But of course, they all had the best of intentions. Hashem wanted to make life easier for Avraham for the next few days so he could recover more readily. And Avraham wanted to do chesed. He wanted to act godly, and he wanted to bring more people into his tent and into the knowledge of Hashem. So it's interesting. Think about this, that concept, that they both have the best of intentions, but they're working sort of at cross purposes. Bear that in mind for when we discuss the end of Vayera, the end of the Parsha, with the Akedah, the binding of Yitzchak, where, again, they're working together, they're working in unison, they all have the best of intentions, but they're working at cross purposes again. There's so often a dynamic, between the lines, between how the Avot, how the patriarchs related with Hashem and how Hashem related to them, that there's, like I say, a dynamic, there's energy there. It's not a straightforward Hashem talks and man listens, or man talks and Hashem listens. There's things going on behind the scenes and under the surface, and that's what we're doing now. We're teasing it out of the words that are before us. So Avraham is sitting outside the tent, looking for someone to pass by, and Hashem is talking. Hashem visits him, and wow, Hashem's visiting Avraham. He should have his full attention. Like, this is incredible. Imagine. Yet he lifts his eyes and he sees 3 people passing by. So he jumps up. Leaving Hashem in the dust, as it were. Interrupts his visit from Hashem and goes out to greet these 3 men and entreat them to come into his tent so that he can honor them. Now, we will learn, of course, we know that these 3 men were Malachim. These 3 men were Malachim. They were angels sent by Hashem. But Avraham doesn't know that. And they're never described as angels in the Torah itself. They're described as 3 men. So as far as he's concerned, these are 3 men. They are 3 idol worshippers. And this is why our sages tell us that he rushed so that he could wash their feet, because our commentators say that there was idolatry which worshipped the dust of the earth, and so they had dust on their feet, and Avraham wanted to make sure they wouldn't bring that idolatry into the tent. But he washes their feet, he greets them, he wants them to come in. So he is completely left off from this meeting that he was having, this visit from Hashem, completely. And is Hashem put off by this? Is he insulted? No. Hashem is thrilled. He's delighted, because Avraham is doing what he's supposed to do, and that is to be hospitable. Hachnasat orachim, we call it in Hebrew, bringing in guests, welcoming guests to your table, welcoming guests to your house, sharing your room and your board with friends, with loved ones, with strangers. And this is a huge mitzvah, a huge chesed, kindness, that we learn from Avraham. This was his specialty. This is how he made souls, right? We were told in the beginning of Lech Lecha last week, when they left Haran, that they took with them the souls they made in Haran. They made souls. And again, our sages teach us that these are people that they brought into the knowledge of Hashem. They made souls. They gave life to their neshamot, to their souls, by connecting them with Hashem. So this is his life's work, Avraham. So he hosts the 3 men, 3 angels, and he asks Sarah to quickly make some cakes while he runs to catch a cow so he can slaughter it and prepare meat for these men to eat. And there's another midrash that says when he chased after this cow, the cow ran away, he chased after it, and he chased the cow into a cave. And the cow went deep into the cave, and Avraham followed the cow, and he followed it into a chamber in the cave. And in that chamber he saw the bodies of Adam and Eve stretched out on their tombs, each with a lamp lit above their heads. And he realized he was in Gan Eden. He had entered into the Garden of Eden. And, of course, this cave that he entered into was the cave of the Machpelah, the double-chambered cave in Hebron, which we'll read about next week, the place that he chooses as the burial place for Sarah. So this midrash comes in here to tie the announcement of the birth of Yitzchak, the upcoming birth of Yitzchak, with the burial of Sarah, and teaches us that the Machpelah is a super holy place that is the entrance, it's the antechamber to the Garden of Eden. And of course, eventually, our matriarchs and patriarchs will be buried in the Machpelah cave alongside Adam and Eve. So anyway, these are all the first 10 or so verses of Vayera. And of course then after they announce, the three men announce that Sarah's going to have a baby in the upcoming year. And of course, at this point, I guess it's clear to Avraham that these men are no ordinary men, but they've come with a message from HaShem himself. And of course, Sarah laughs, which is why to laugh in Hebrew is litzchok, which is why Yitzchak was given that name. It means he will laugh, or he who will laugh, Yitzchak. And it's interesting. I don't know exactly what to make of this, but she laughs, and we read it before. And Hashem said to Avraham, "Why is it that Sarah laughed, saying, 'Shall I in truth bear a child, though I have aged?' Is anything beyond Hashem? At the appointed time I will return to you this time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah denied it, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was frightened. But Hashem said, "No, you laughed indeed." So this little conversation, three-way conversation really, between Sarah, Hashem, and Avraham is just very fascinating. She laughs, which on the one hand she's laughing, Hashem sort of interprets it as she's laughing out of disbelief. What, I can't do this? Of course I can do this. She might have been laughing out of delight. I also have another interpretation, is that her laughter, in fact, it says in English it says, "and Sarah laughed at herself," right? That's the English. In Hebrew, the wording goes like this. Vatitzchak Sarah bekirba, which literally means in her innards, in her insides, in her guts. She laughed in her guts, right? She laughed to herself. She laughed in her guts. I sort of see that as a sign that her innards are awakening. They're laughing. Laughing it gives life. Laughter gives life. Laughter makes us feel young. And I see that inner laughter as the awakening of her youth, of her biological youth and ability to have a child. So I think it's very revealing in that response, in that way. And Hashem's response, Hashem wasn't the least bit bothered by Avraham getting up and walking away in the middle of his visit so he could greet the three men. But now it's almost, he's sort of been taken aback by Sarah's laughter, and he makes a point of it. And she denied it And I guess she could plausibly deny it, but she only laughed inwardly. So it wasn't she didn't laugh out loud. But he said, no, you laughed, which means HaShem, he knew what was going on inside of her. He knew she laughed. But of course, he just, I don't know, he just was testing her. You laughed indeed. So maybe, on the other hand, if I follow my own line of thinking here, maybe Hashem was saying, yeah, you laughed, and that's good. You laughed, that's good. You played into my hands. You are going to have a child. You now have the ability, because of your laughter, you now have the ability to bear a child. And then the men got up right after that and walked from there and went down towards Sodom, Sodom in Hebrew. And of course, we all know the story of Sodom and of the brim and fires. How do we say it? Brimstone and fire that Hashem rained upon the evil people of Sodom. Only after Hashem, now, again, this is such a revealing aspect of God's relationship with Avraham and God's relationship with Avraham's children in the future, and God's relationship with us if we're open to it. When Avraham escorts these three men down the road toward Sodom, and Hashem, before he even reveals to us what he has in mind, he says, shall I conceal from Avram what I do? And in verse 18, now that Avram is surely to become a great nation and a mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed by him. For I have loved him, because he commands his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of Hashem, doing charity and justice, in order that Hashem might bring them upon Avraham that which we have spoken of him. So Hashem says, I love Avraham so much, and he's so good, that I've got to share him what I'm going to do. I want his participation. I want his input. God is inviting Avraham to get a sneak preview of God's intentions for Sodom. And of course, what's it all about? God says, I'm going to destroy Sodom because the people are evil. And Avraham says, well, what if 50 righteous people, 50 tzaddikim are living there? You're going to still destroy the entire city? I mean, don't they count for anything? And God says, you're right. I won't destroy the entire city if there's 50. And then Avraham he's bargaining God down in numbers from this point on. There's only 45, what if there's only 40? And they both get down to 10. God says, look, there's 10 righteous people in Sodom. I won't destroy the city. As it turns out, there aren't 10. There's only Lot and his 3 daughters in the end. And so the city is destroyed, and only Lot and his 3 daughters are saved. But the point is that God, he wants to rule the world with man's participation and with man's blessing. Well, this is phenomenal. I said last year in a temple talk, again, talking about the exact same parsha, the exact same story, that Avraham this was a teaching moment. Avraham was teaching Hashem how we, man, understand justice. If God were to destroy the entire city, man's going to say, well, there were rights, and there were 50 righteous people. Man's going to say, well, that's not justice. Those righteous people, they shouldn't have died. And that was a point that Avraham made to Hashem. Okay, now I got a response last year, I remember to this day. Someone was very offended, saying that man can teach God something. I mean, yes, I admit that is an outlandish, ridiculous statement, but I stand by it. I hold by it. God, we saw what happened in the generation of the flood. God was disappointed with man and destroyed all of man. And then God made a pact, a covenant with Noah after the flood, saying he won't do that again, no matter how evil man behaves. So in this case, it wasn't all of humanity that was behaving evil. It was just the residents of Sodom. But even on this microcosmic level, Avraham intervenes on God's behest and says, you have to have a little, you have to tweak your response, God. You have to have a little, again, a word escapes me, I just can't think of the word I want, but you have to refine your response when man screws up, so that man will understand, so that man will see that that this is justice, and that there's a right and the wrong, and man won't always be, seeing complete destruction and saying, well, we just, God is powerful, I get that, and just watch out, head for the hills. No, Avraham wants man to learn right from wrong. He wants man to pursue justice. He wants mankind to pursue righteousness and loving kindness. And in order to do that, in order to encourage man to do that, he needs God's shituf pa'ula. He needs God's partnership. And that's what Avraham really is pursuing here in this very fascinating not bargaining, but negotiation with HaShem over how many righteous people living in Sodom will stay God's hand concerning the destruction. And of course, after this, the parsha goes into the terrifying story of Sodom, of the three angels, two angels at that point, who go to Sodom and are welcomed into the household of Lot, and then this mob, this posse forms at Lot's door, and they want to take these men out and do evil things to them. And then you have the very, let's say, certainly in today's terms, bizarre offer by Lot that you can have my daughters, just leave these men alone. It was a pretty desperate move, but the angels themselves saved the day by striking that angry mob with blindness so that they could quickly grab Lot and bring him back in the household and lock the door. And again, there are many midrashim about how evil these people were. And one midrash says that they had a hotel. They would welcome people to the town, welcome and bring them to the hotel. The hotel had a bed, and if you were taller than the length of the bed, in order to make you fit the bed, they would cut your legs off at the proper point. And if you were too short for the bed, they would stretch you, meaning they wanted conformity. They wanted everybody to be the same. And let's just take that a little further. They wanted everybody to think the same, and they wanted everybody to do as they did. And if that meant stretching a person or cutting off a person's legs, well, so be it. They're going to do it. So I think maybe worth talking about a metaphor for PC, for political correctness, for wokeness, in which, hey, if you don't think like us and do what we do, then you're a bigot and a racist and a homophobe and everything else under the sun, that every other curse that they can hurl at you. But that's what Sodom was. That's what Sodom was. That was their evil. That every man for himself, but you had to conform to whatever they declared was right and whatever they declared was wrong. And it was mankind arbitrarily setting up the rules and arbitrarily deciding what's good and what's evil. And this is the exact opposite, of course, of Avraham and his relationship with HaShem, which he bequeathed to his children and to the entire world. And here is the music. That's all. I didn't get to talk about the Akedah, about the binding of Yitzhak. Maybe next week we can squeeze that in. Thank you so much for being with me. Temple Talk.